Hello, everyone. Welcome back. I do like seeing Data Collector on there with RJ. That man is a vast treasure trove of data. Unfortunately, I haven't gotten to talk to him in a while, but maybe we can change that. Alrighty. Well, welcome back, everyone. We are continuing in our Reading Creationism series. We are reading this book, Did Man Get Here by Evolution or by Creation? Joining me today is host and co-host Peter. Gonna go for it. Welcome back.
It's good to be back. By the way, you mentioned our dear friend RJ.
Yes.
We should wish him a happy birthday. 70. He was 70.
When did he turn 70?
That's a good question. It because of time zones, it could be today for you or yesterday for me or something like that.
I'll have to check Facebook because I'm not on Facebook anymore really, and so I don't see the notifications which told me when people. That's today. Yes, happy birthday.
Yes,
to RJ.
And he's on a road trip.
He shows up in our. Oh, he's on a road trip. Okay. I need to add his birthday then to my list. Yes, happy birthday, RJ. If you guys are not aware, RJ and I co-authored a book, The Rocks Were There, Volume 1. We're working on Volume 2. The first one is already, I'm pretty sure, the most comprehensive creationism refuting book in existence, but together they'll definitely be. We covered a lot of topics, and we still have more to cover. So fun stuff. Yeah, I'll have to reach out to RJ then. Yep. This book, Did Man Get Here by Evolution or by Creation, was published in 1967 by Watchtower. And this book was gifted to me back when I was in high school. And I read it back then. And it's something. And so we decided to go through it line by line, page by page, chapter by chapter. And so that's what we've been doing. We're now on our lucky 13th episode. Fun fact, Peter. Just today, the very person who sent me this book originally called me and asked me to listen to a radio station. And I did for about an hour, and it raised my blood pressure through the roof. But I now know what book we're reviewing next. So,
Oh?
Yes. Oh, it's some bad climate change stuff. Because why not, you know?
Oh. From the same people, or...
No, from a guy who actually has a master's degree in geology. So not climatology, but he has a master's degree in geology. And he claims that climate change is not actually real, or if it is real, it's not that bad. So
it figures. Why is it always people that might be scientists or have a degree but not on the topic that they're talking about and telling that I don't get it.
Well, and the thing is, you can even see climate change happening in geology, right? You can do like soil sample data and stuff. And we even had, when we had our geochemist friend on a few episodes back, John, the Age of Rocks, his research is in like Pleistocene cave data and how you can see changes in the climate over time. And so, but you're right, this guy I don't think he's doing, because he has a master, so I don't think he's doing like academic work in the field on climate change or on anything really. So it'd be interesting to see his takes on climate change, so I'm excited for that. So we'll have to read that one next.
Yeah.
Because I was listening to him be interviewed this morning, and then the guy who interviewed him just kind of kept going on and talking about other stuff, and so It was a lot. It was a lot, Peter. Let me tell you. So I know exactly what we're reading next. All right. So, so we are continuing in the chapter How Old is Man, which is chapter something or other. Chapter
which we just covered.
9.
We just covered
chapter
that.
9.
70 as of today.
Yes, man is 70 years old today.
Man is 70 years old.
Hey, if the Earth, Peter, if the Earth is 4.5 billion years old, how is it only 2022? Didn't think of that, did you?
See? Yeah. Take that, evolutionists.
Exactly.
If Jesus didn't exist, why is it 2022?
Right.
I mean,
right. Oh man. I think the guy who was interviewing the anti-climate change dude is also a creationist, so that's fun. The Venn diagram of like creationists and climate change skeptics, they're just deniers. I don't know why I say skeptics. And like anti-vaxxers, that Venn diagram tends to be a pretty close circle. It's not 100%, mind you, but it's pretty close. You know, there's a lot of overlap between all those groups.
And so because I don't know if I mentioned this on the last episode, but I watched a video of our favorite breatharian, Mr.
Uncooked Matthew,
Mr. Raw Matt, and so he was reviewing a couple of articles. Dinosaurs helped build the pyramids and some other stuff on a completely fake website.
Bless his heart.
And I've shot that to a few people who do reviews of videos, and so I'm waiting for some responses to come out of that, because it says in the logo of the websites where facts don't matter.
Bless that man's barely functioning heart.
Yes.
I mean, good Lord. Oh gosh.
But he and SFT will probably be writing a book on how dinosaurs helped build the pyramids.
I'm sure they will. I was reading something the other day. People were talking about the difference between SFT and Raw Matt's books, and the primary difference between SFT and Raw Matt's writing styles is really that SFT at least has like fully formed coherent sentences. Raw Matt not so much. His are like, he has a lot of like just stops in the middle.
Well, but keep in mind, so he survived on breath for a long period of time. That may have done something to his brain. I mean, if you look at the man, he's not healthy. He is not healthy.
No, he's not. No, he is not. He's still sticking with that, every other day I'm a breatharian, diet kind of guy. Oh man. Anyway, all right. let's get into it. Page 106.
Page 106.
And I quote, "This is exactly what happened in the flood." Oh, sorry. This is referring to organisms being killed and frozen suddenly. "This is exactly what happened in the flood the Bible speaks of, a gigantic downpour of water that undoubtedly was accompanied by freezing winds in polar regions engulfed living things when the water canopy surrounding the earth descended." Genesis 7:11 and 12. "At the poles, the temperature change would be the most rapid and drastic. The forms of life engulfed there would be preserved in the frozen muck. Toward the equator, freezing would be less likely, but the organisms would be covered with layers of silt and earth that would be much, much older than the buried creatures." I guess we can keep going. "Such a cataclysm is discussed in the article The Earth's Shifting Crust by Professor of History and Anthropology C.H. Hapgood in the Saturday Evening Post of January 10th, 1959. He says, quote, "One of these periods of wholesale destruction of life occurred at the end of the last ice age. It was a natural disaster which, according to one writer, destroyed some 40 million animals in North America alone. In a few thousand years, life on Earth assumed a radically new aspect. It is apparent that millions of animals once flourished in areas now bitterly cold. With regard to the last ice age, we have recently come into possession of new information that deepens its mystery. By use of the radiocarbon method, scientists revised the date of the end of the last ice age, making it only 10,000 years ago instead of 30,000 years. This discovery challenged the fundamental principle of the system established by 19th century geologist Charles Lyell. He supposed that geological processes in the past always proceeded at their present rates. Processes such as rainfall, snowfall, erosion, and the deposition of sediment. There was a very marked acceleration of the rate of these geological processes during the last part of the Ice Age. Some factor must, therefore, have been operating that is not operating now. The other new method of dating, which we call the Ionian method, has also produced a major upset. Applied to date the sediments obtained in cores from the bottom of the Ross Sea in Antarctica, it is revealed that during the last million years, Antarctica has several times been non-glacial. When these cores were dated, it was found that the most recent ice age in the Ross Sea began only 6,000 years ago. Okay, I guess we'll just finish this one out. So science is close quote, sorry. So science is discovering the facts, the truth of what the Bible shows, that there were catastrophes that caused great climatic and terrestrial changes. One such, the global deluge over 4,000 years ago, destroyed living things in vast numbers and covered them with layers of icy muck, sand, silt, and earth. All right, let's talk about it. So the funny thing is that I seem to be forgetting, Peter. I don't remember there being any mention of a water canopy that descended on the earth in Genesis 7, 11, and 12.
I've never seen that mentioned either, but I know someone
I don't remember that.
I know someone who's really well versed when it comes to that. You may have heard of him. He's a doctor. He has several PhDs actually. His name is Kent Hovind, and he said the canopy came down, and I'm still trying to figure out how a dome came down and then on the flat Earth, and so basically it came down on the edges and in the center, but not anywhere else, because those are the frozen parts on the flat Earth.
Right.
Yeah. It's it's a mystery. That's God willed it that way. I think that's how we should take that.
This is so nonsense. The forms of life engulfed there would be preserved in the frozen muck.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so what about all the fossils at the poles or near the poles that are not in frozen muck? So, for instance, Tiktaalik and also it's the other one they discovered recently, Kukitania, both came from the Arctic Circle, so near the pole. They were not covered in frozen muck. The sedimentology of their environment, where they're buried, reveals that they were in a tropical environment, in a tropical wetland environment. And so they weren't flash frozen, but they lived near the pole, and it was apparently very warm up there.
It might be. So everything shifted. We know that we had land masses speeding through the ocean during the flood, getting to the place where they would be ending up after the flood. So, probably that is where the Garden of Eden was. That is now up in the poles, so we can't find it covered in ice.
Turned and went up there. Yeah.
Yeah. It's a little sad.
That's entirely possible.
The angels frozen at the gate, still waiting for Adam and Eve to come back and to shoo them off.
Right.
They got frozen.
In a few more decades, Peter, they'll be unfrozen, so you don't even have to worry about it.
Yeah. Well, but that is if you believe those pesky climate science guys.
I mean, guess that's true. Or the satellite pictures of the shrinking Arctic
Yeah, but
But the Earth is flat,
we
so the
all know.
satellites aren't real.
Yeah,
Sorry,
we all
I
know
was gonna say.
satellites aren't real. I mean, that
Right,
is just your brain on 5G. I mean,
because they would bump into like the dome,
yes,
the crystal dome. Yeah,
obviously.
where the sun
Yeah.
is embedded in the moon and all that. Yes.
What they don't know is
Um.
that NASA has sent up rockets, and so they screwed hooks in the dome and hung the satellites from there. So that makes them
Yes.
stationary, and this is how GPS works.
Yes. Absolutely. I believe it. I would buy it. Or vice versa at vice versa at the other pole. In Antarctica, at the South Pole, we also have fossils showing that at different stages in Earth's history, Antarctica was deglaciated. It was
Mm-hmm.
tropical, like in the Triassic, all the way through the Mesozoic into I think it was like the Eocene or Oligocene was when it finally froze over, because you find marsupial fossils down there and dinosaur fossils. So it wasn't frozen down there,
Mm-hmm.
forever. And there were tropical animals and plants that lived there. So they weren't covered with icy muck either. It's kind of funny because he's trying to generalize, or they, them, she, I don't know. The author is trying to generalize a few examples of organisms that died in the Ice Age recently to all organisms that we find, to all extinct organisms that we find in polar regions. And it's just not generalizable. You just can't do that. It's not
But
possible.
keep in mind the amazing scientific source that they have, the Saturday Evening Post. I mean,
That's true.
That's where we get all the good science, from the Saturday Evening Post.
Yep. It was just yesterday, Peter. I had opened the Saturday Evening Post, and I saw that particles were created from like forces or whatever. So, did you hear about that? Did you hear that?
That's a new one for me. I mean,
Oh, okay. So these research, and I'm probably butchering this, and feel free to correct me side chat. But these researchers took these particles, and they basically pulled them apart. They removed like all the forces except for, I think it was gravity was the only one they couldn't like eliminate. But they pull these apart, and in the space between them, they actually formed more particles. So they made matter where there was just space between them.
mm-hmm.
So it wasn't nothing. So it's not like they were making these out of nothing, but they were making these particles out of space. At least so it seemed to me that way.
Maybe God's real after all. I mean, we have a Christian in the chat, someone who recently canceled a debate twice and then made a video that he won because the other guy didn't show up. Well, it happens. If you cancel a debate, your opponent probably won't show up. That's how that works.
Right. Yeah,
And-
that's
and he
how that
says-
works. Yes.
He said, "We are made in the image of God," which I believe, because he's as stupid as the guy who wrote the Bible and didn't know anything. So, yeah. Hey, Rebuke and Reprove, otherwise known as Jill. The most
where were we?
dishonest Christian on the interwebs, by the way.
I don't know. That's a pretty low bar, Peter. That
Yeah,
takes effort
no.
and talent to be the most.
We're talking about a guy who I have the sound bites, who said that your ancestors are your descendants, and longitudinal lines are the lines that take the long way. So,
You know what? I did watch a movie where a person was their own ancestor,
mhm.
and that was Predestination. So the person goes, they basically live their life, then they work for this like time traveling agency, and they actually go back in time and like impregnate themselves.
There's a much easier way to do that. There's a much easier. So I've been working in the Dutch country music scene. There is this guy called Willie Nelson who I think it was in 2015 or 2016 released a remake of a song called I Am My Own Grandpa. So just listen to that. It is really possible. He will outline the whole family tree, which doesn't fork but comes in on itself. It
curves back on itself.
Yes.
Oh dear.
It's the redneck family tree. That's probably how we got our buddy Jill here.
Oh man, that's that kind of reminds me of have you ever seen the movie Idiocracy, where Terry Crews is the president?
No, I still have that on my watch list. By the way,
it's an okay movie. It's a lot of people make reference to it. But one of the things is at the beginning they're showing how intelligent people go extinct basically, and the Hicks come to predominate, and basically it's because this one redneck keeps boinking with lots of different women, whereas the one nerd guy has a heart attack during sex or something like that. So
which reminds me that anyway, because of my long hair, I used to be called a redneck. Now people start calling me a hippie. And having two girlfriends, I found something really funny, and someone said, how do you keep count how many girlfriends you can have? And said, well, one Mrs. Hippie, two Mrs. Hippie. And that's where I stopped.
I think it broke up a little bit. I didn't catch that.
Okay, they asked me how I would count how many women I can have, and I said, well, one Mrs. Hippie,
okay,
two Mrs. Hippie, and that's where I stopped.
Wow. Wow. Slow clap, Peter.
Yeah. I mean, I'm 60. Okay. I'm allowed to make dad jokes now.
That's true. All right. One of these periods of wholesale destruction of life occurred at the end of the last ice age. It was a natural disaster, which, according to one writer, destroyed some 40 million animals in North America alone. In a few thousand years, life on Earth assumed a radically new aspect. It is apparent that millions of animals once flourished in areas now bitterly cold. I have no idea what that's referring to. Previous page, Peter. 107.
Oh. Am I oh, okay.
I wasn't reading the next part. I was just going back over the stuff we've already
okay.
I have no idea what that's referring to. I don't know what he means by that, where he's saying 40 million animals in North America when extinct. I don't know. I don't know what that means. With regard to the last ice age, we have recently come into possession of new information that deepens its mystery by use of the radiocarbon method. Hey, I thought we don't use the radiocarbon method. Scientists revised the date of the end of the last ice age, making it only 10,000 years ago instead of 30,000 years. So that's still relatively true, but we know why ice ages happen. They're events called Milankovitch cycles. So basically, as our Earth orbits the sun, it has periods where it has orbits where it orbits closer to the sun for part of its orbit, and then other parts of its cyclical elliptical orbit, it actually orbits farther away, so it sort of oscillates between closer and farther, and this oscillation produces these hot and cold periods, these greenhouse and icehouse periods on Earth, and they last for thousands of years. And so that's not really a mystery. We understand how that happens. This discovery challenged the fundamental principle of the system established by the 19th century geologist Charles Lyell. He supposed that geological processes in the past always proceeded at their present rates. Processes such as rainfall, snowfall, erosion, and the deposition of sediment. There was a very marked acceleration of the rate of these geological processes during the last part of the Ice Age. Some factor must therefore have been operating that is not operating now. Well, I'm willing to bet that glaciation can speed up erosion. If you have a big glacier and it's moving along, I'm pretty sure that's going to cause some erosion, but that's still very gradual erosion. Oh, I mean, maybe it's faster. Maybe a glacier will erode faster than normal weathering will, That's fine. But like, that's still what he's referring to is uniformitarianism, which isn't actually what researchers use or geologists use nowadays. They use actualism, not uniformitarianism. But it's still slow. It's still a gradual process, and we still know how it works. So I'm not really sure what he's getting at here.
By
The
the
other
way,
thing is,
you mentioned that they use they don't use carbon dating.
right? Yeah, we
think-
talked about that in I think it was the last episode.
I think Professor Dr. Highly Learned Hovind actually watched one of your shows because quite recently he came up with a new thing, which is rare for the man Hovind.
Okay.
He found out that because of the testing of nuclear weapons, there was a difference in the whole carbon-14 thing that throws everything off, and now we can't date anything anymore. I wonder where he got that, because I strictly remember that there was this guy on your channel who said that yes, that was a fact, and that is how we now know that we can date things to within
we
days.
have to recalibrate.
Yeah, to within days.
Right, yeah.
So it's not throwing everything off. It is now showing us how incredibly accurate it is these days.
Right. I mean, yeah, and all John said was, well, it's just something else we have to factor into our equations. We just have to adjust for that now. And very weird. Maybe he was. I don't know if he still is, but Standing was a subscriber of mine for a long time. He may still be. And I feel kind of like, if anyone's not familiar with this, I highly recommend you go find the video. There's a guy named Steven Crowder, and Crowder's a conservative pundit, and he's deathly terrified. I can words, I promise. Of a guy named Sam Cedar, who is a liberal talk show guy. And so one thing that Crowder will never do is actually, he watches Sam Cedar's show. We know this, but he doesn't ever talk to Sam Cedar. He's afraid of talking to Sam Cedar. And so there was a talk where, so Crowder was going to debate another guy, but this other guy had Sam Cedar like come in and talk to Crowder, and Crowder just freaked out. And it's a hilarious video. And it was H3H3 was the guy who hosted that. And so I feel kind of like Standing is like the Crowder to our Sam Cedar.
Yes.
Like he watches, he's there in the background, like
He
molding
lurks.
about the things that we say. Yes, he lurks.
He lurks.
But he'll never come on and actually talk. And I know that he lurks because I've made like posts on YouTube, like subtweeting him, basically, not naming him. But then he comes in and comments on them. So I know he's there watching. He just doesn't want to interact. And that's fine. He doesn't have to. He's entirely welcome to just lurk. That's fine.
Yes.
I lurk on different sites too.
As do I.
Anyway, back to this. So uniformitarianism. So the reason that uniformitarianism isn't an accurate representation of what geologists think anymore is we know that there are some events that are rare or cataclysmic that occur in Earth's history that are not explicable on slow, gradual processes. One of them, what killed the dinosaurs?
Yes.
A big asteroid. Well,
yeah, the famous KT boundary.
Yeah, those don't happen all the time. It's not like asteroids are hitting us regularly. Maybe very tiny ones are, but not super big ones like
Jackson,
the KT impactor.
That is just showing God showing off with his powers, because in this right. tumultuous, tremendous flood that we had, God managed to crash an asteroid at the same time and have this layer all across the world at the same
right, exactly.
at the same spot, which is kind of tricky. if you have these wild waters and catching the
Yes.
residue everywhere, that's a neat trick that God pulled off there.
Yeah, somehow none of the tektites or iridium dust or whatever, none of it got like carried to lower or higher layers. It only somehow ended up in this one layer. I don't know how that happened.
Yeah, I don't know.
Anyway, it's crazy. I mean, God can do whatever. He's omnipotent, right? So, why not?
He can just will it into place and it happens.
That's true. So yeah, so in that sense, so yes, we don't really adhere, or the geologists don't really adhere to uniformitarianism anymore. It's actualism. They factor in uniformitarianism, yes, but also they recognize there are processes which are non-uniform that also happen. And we do the same in biology. There was a big argument back in the 70s and 80s between the gradualists and the punctuated equilibrium guys like Stephen Jay Gould and Niles Eldredge. And what they were arguing was, well, sometimes evolution occurs relatively quickly. It's still gradual in a sense, but it occurs faster. And the gradualist people were like, no, you're saying it goes faster than we're willing to allow, which we now know, of course, there are different rates of evolution, which actually even back in the 40s, biologists recognized there were different rates of evolution, of course. But sometimes evolution goes faster, sometimes it goes slower, sometimes there are jumps, things like that. So it's not all just one single rate.
Mm-hmm.
So sure, these things were accelerated for during glacial periods. I'm not super surprised at that. The other new method of dating, called Ionian method, has produced a major upset. Applied to date the sediments obtained in cores from the bottom of the Ross Sea in Antarctica, it is revealed that during the last million years, Antarctica has several times been non-glacial. When these cores were dated, it was found that the most recent ice age in the Ross Sea began only 6,000 years ago. So Antarctica was frozen, but there weren't glaciers in this one particular area. Or I guess the last time there were glaciers in this one particular area was about 6,000 years ago.
Yeah, it's funny that
okay,
and this is just pissing me off. So they will say, okay, Antarctica, it has been revealed that it has been frozen several times during the last million years. That is a million years. The whole time. Million years before creation, before it was there, it was frozen.
Yes.
Before it existed, before frost existed.
Well, remember, he said earlier that he believes animals existed or could have existed for millions of years. It's just humans who have only been around for 10,000 years. He said that in the.
I wish these people would agree on one model. Oh yeah, well, okay, model might be a little bit too far over there.
This allows for thousands of millions of years that the material of the Earth could have been in existence before being inhabited by living things. But you're right. No, I agree with you. I wish that they had a single model they all agreed on. But Peter, they can't even get the lore right. They have to have different competing lores.
Mm-hmm. By the way,
also Jamie E found the Saturday Evening Post article. Well, thank you.
Yes.
I'm not. Nothing about this is very strange to me.
I opened it up and it says, "Are your eyes out of date?" Mine are, because I have to wear contacts. Otherwise, I don't see anything. So yeah,
I actually need to get some new glasses myself. Yeah.
I wear glasses, but I ditched the frames a long time ago because it's more comfortable.
Oh, I like wearing my glasses. I like having the beard with the glasses, the professorial look.
The learned look. Anyway. The learned look.
I have to pretend to look learned because I'm not actually. Anyway.
I would doubt that. I would doubt.
So I'm not really sure. So to summarize, I guess, I really don't know what this, well, I guess, now that Jamie's pulled it up, I guess we can look. Maybe we can figure out what this 40 million dead critters is a reference to. Oh Lord, that's a long article. If you want to look for it, Peter, you have at it, because oh wait, actually here it is. One of these periods of wholesale destruction occurred at the end blah blah blah. At that time, the mastodon and the mammoth, the giant beaver, the giant sloth, the saber-toothed tiger, and many other species were destroyed, while others, like the horse in North America, were displaced from their original habitats and driven to the ends of the earth. It was a natural disaster which, according to one writer, destroyed some 40 million animals in North America alone, and it occurred when the climate was this occurred when the climate was improving at the end rather than the beginning of the Ice Age. In a few thousand years, life on Earth assumed a radically new aspect. There has been no acceptable explanation of this. Bodies of mammoths. It is apparent that millions of animals once flourished in areas now bitterly cold. Plentiful evidence that bodies of hundreds of thousands of animals of all kinds were entrapped in the great ice sheets. Yep, cool.
Jamie says, quote starts in the second column.
Yeah. I saw that. Yeah, I already read that one. The circumstances require an agency that can change climate rapidly and not merely over extended periods of time. A shift of the crust of the Earth can provide both gradual and abrupt climate changes, for the reason that it must inevitably set up intense strains and stresses in the crust. These strains can be expected to increase the rate of volcanic eruptions, in which vast quantities of volcanic dust will suddenly cloud the Earth's atmosphere. The meteorologist Humphreys showed that years ago, one eruption temporarily cut off 20% of the sun's radiant heat from the Earth's entire surface. We can thus hazard that the mammoths were killed by deep snowfalls and buried in freezing mud following a sudden and catastrophic weather change caused by some distant volcanic holocaust and its proliferating dust. Now, Peter, let's just pause there because that's enough. That's all we need.
Yeah.
That doesn't quite sound like a flood to me. Does that sound like a flood to you?
No.
So when the book says on the very next page 108, that the global deluge over 4,000 years ago destroyed living things in vast numbers and covered them with layers of icy muck, sand, silt, and earth.
Mm-hmm.
Would you say that they're representing the article we just quoted accurately?
Nope. No, because there's no mention of any ash layers, which you would see if you have a lot of volcanic eruptions. It's to me is mind-boggling if the entire Earth is covered in water, how we would even have these ash layers, because how would it get into the air? Would it just suddenly dry when it gets to the surface and then float off into the air? I mean, how does that even work?
Right.
This is
right.
And you never see a creationist addressing that. When you have
they're volcanic aerial deposits.
Yes.
Yeah.
You will never see any one of them either acknowledging or addressing that, because that is obviously something that they can't find a workaround for. It doesn't work in that way. Yeah. And we can see it that it happened. There are multiple instances where we had cataclysmic volcanic eruptions that have left a mark on planet Earth, I think pretty much globally. And no creationist will ever touch that with a 10-foot pole.
Yep, exactly right.
Or they will come up with something that's so incredibly stupid that even other creationists laugh at it. But yeah, I've never seen anyone come up with a good explanation on how that would work.
I haven't either. Yeah, I guess they just kind of say, oh no, it's not actually a dry deposit. It was actually underwater. But there's no evidence that it was underwater. That's what they say for the Coconino sandstone, which was this wind-swept desert deposit, basically. It's in the Grand Canyon, and we see reptiles who were running up the slopes of these sand dunes and stuff, and they've left the imprints of their little hands in the sediment, and now we have them to look at. But it's very clearly not underwater.
Mm-hmm.
These tracks weren't made underwater; they were made on land in these desert environments. And so it's ridiculous to try to say, oh no, this was actually underwater, even though there's no evidence, there's no fish here, there's no aquatic organisms or semi-aquatic organisms. It's just,
and that's another thing. So I don't know if you know, but Arn Ra recently visited Glen Rose, Texas, the place where we have the famous human footprints alongside
the Biloxi human tracks.
Yes. First of all, the tracks aren't human, and the people who were there and who were cleaning up the entire site, because it's now the dry season and you can actually see the footprints. So they explained what it actually was. What I want creationists
it's an ornithomimid.
Yeah, what I want creationists to address is the following. And they like doing experiments because science is something that you can test and replicate. So after a good rain, when everything's muddy at Dinosaur Adventureland, to have people make footprints in the mud and then gather all the inhabitants of the cult around these footprints, hand them all a bucket of water and throw it on the footprints, and then wait and see if you can see them. Because if you have footprints in the mud and then you have violent water coming in, they're not going to be saved after. And you can test whatever you want. And they have to have buckets with different kinds of sand and pebbles and throw that on the footprints to see if they can find them afterwards. It would be a good experiment. I would really like to see that in one of Hovin's. He recently started this new science series. Today, the thing came out with the static electricity. It's probably also, that is probably the devil causing that. I haven't watched it yet. But have people do that. I mean, you're about testing, and with on every tour he has this little jar that he shakes up and says, "See, it settles in layers." And then he was stupid enough a few weeks ago to post a video where the guy in the video actually tried to confirm the flood, but said that was a ridiculous example because that weren't exactly layers and it wouldn't settle the way it did in the flood. So he debunked his own jar with dirt that he's showing people every single time they take the real tour. And it's
amazing.
There are more contradictions in creation. Yeah, there are more contradictions in creationism than there are in the Bible, and that says a lot.
It does, yeah. That reminded me of there's a video on YouTube. I think it's titled the World's Shortest Debate with a Creationist or something to that effect.
I saw
and
it. Isn't that
it's Donald?
Yeah.
It's Donald Prothero.
Yes.
So Donald Prothero is a paleontologist, and he was on this. He was on a like a documentary. This documentary would get a bunch of people who believe some conspiracy.
Yes.
Get them all together,
BBC.
and they would visit experts.
It was a BBC documentary.
BBC documentary.
Yeah.
And they would go visit experts. They visited Jerry Coyne. They visited Donald Prothero and a couple other people. I don't remember who else. But anyway, so this group. So they go to the Grand Canyon and they meet Donald Prothero there, who's a famous American paleontologist, and we've had the privilege of having him on the show before, actually, a couple of times. And so they go and they meet with him, and they're talking about the shape of the Grand Canyon, how you got all these curves and everything, like the horseshoe bend and all that sort of stuff. And one of the conspiracy, the creationist says, "Oh, well, this was formed by the flood." And Prothero's like, "That's not how the water works." And so he hands them a bucket with water. He tells them to dump it. And so they do, and the water goes in like straight lines or diagonal, basically. But it doesn't curve back on itself. It goes straight out, right, basically. And so they're looking at like, oh, well. And then they're talking with Prothero, and the creationist guy says, well, what about creationists who say that this was formed by a flood? And Prothero just says, I don't think they're scientists.
Yeah,
Like,
I think he said something along the lines. And what do you think about the explanation the creation scientists come up with? And that's when he said, "Yeah, I don't consider
like,
that
scientists or something like that.
I don't consider that science." And
which
then
is, the whole video is only like 30 seconds. It's really funny.
The look on the face of the creationist that you don't consider this science. I mean, he's completely stunned.
I saw that dude, that creationist dude, in like a creationist video for some organization. I don't remember who it was, but I saw him in something else at a different time. But most of them, or a couple of them by the end, were like, oh, dang, I guess creationism isn't true. It was like there was a woman with them, and by the end of it, she was like, oh, okay, well, maybe I'm not right about this. There was also Richard Dawkins.
Keep in mind, this guy was from the UK. In the UK, we have Discount Kent Hovind, a guy called Richard Kent, who is famous for coining the idea of the fire-breathing dragons because they had small nostrils. After the flood, there was not enough oxygen in the air, and so they had to breathe so fast that their nostrils caught fire. If you see that particular clip of him explaining that, you can see he's struggling with the utter nonsense that is coming out of his mouth and putting that into coherent. You can see him, should I actually say this? You can see it on his face. I'm going to be laughed at. I'm still going to say it.
Well, I mean, that's like Dwayne Gish said the same thing for Parasaurolophus breathed fire out of its nostrils because the bombardier beetle makes a toxic liquid. Like, these are in no way related to each other. First of all, no. It's like, because someone he was claiming, Gish was claiming that, like, when you combine the two chemicals, and I've forgotten what they are, but when you combine them, they form, like, they get super hot and everything, and that's what caused it. No, actually, if you combine the two chemicals, they don't get super hot. Like, they mix, but they don't, like, boil or whatever he claimed they do. So, no. And he was actually in a debate with someone, and they did that on stage. They took the two chemicals, put them together, and they were like, look, nothing happened. And of course, he kept claiming it anyways because he's Dwayne Gish. And then... and so, no, absolutely not. Parasaurolophus, fire breathing, like, there are so many ways that doesn't work. It's truly difficult to, like, think of where to start with that. But anyways, the other thing that reminded me of was Richard Dawkins did something similar with a bunch of students, also in the UK. So he takes this class, and there's, like, it's a YouTube, like, documentary or something, and he's explaining to them how evolution works. So he goes into this class, and he's, discussing with them, and they're like, some of them are like, yeah, evolution may be true, may not be. Some of them are like, I don't believe in evolution. And so he takes all of them, and he explains how evolution works, and he, like, takes them out looking for fossils, and he explains how the fossils got there and all this sort of stuff. And so by the end, most of them are like, oh, okay, well, maybe evolution is true. Okay. And so I think that's, kind of interesting, that sort of stuff. But
so
there are lots of old funny Dawkins interviews out there.
I'm Dutch, and so our mind is wired differently from the rest of the human civilization. I kind of like the idea that we have this great designer who designed everything in intricate ways, and because everything has a common designer, as we know from people like Kent Hovind and Ken Ham.
Right.
And this designer, at some point during his designing, thought, so what if I take the ass of a bombardier beetle and put that in the nose of a dragon? How would that work?
Yes, absolutely.
I mean, only God could come up with something like that.
The problem, one of the issues, like, with creationism broadly is, like, if you actually think about that, with how, like, when you take things that are exapted, basically they're co-opted. So when you look at evolution, a lot of what you have is co-option of structures, not the wholesale invention of structures.
Mm-hmm.
So you take something that you already have and you modify it for a new purpose. The problem is, though, you're taking something which already existed for a different purpose and you are having to modify it to do something new. Now, if you're a designer, why would you do that? What sense does that make? Just make a new thing, make a new part. Just if you're an omnipotent designer, you don't have to go, okay, what if these legs, which were originally for running, are now digging or swimming? So I have to build a paddle or a big like shovel basically off of running legs.
Mm-hmm.
Like, where's the sense in that? Why not just redo the arms completely or the legs?
Yes.
Just start from scratch. Redo
and
it.
why would you need all these bones if all you have is a flipper? Why would you need all the bones in the wrist in that particular flipper just to do this? I mean,
why do manatees need fingernails? They're not using them for anything. You know, it's if you're an all-powerful designer, why not just give whales like fish fins? Why not? Just might
give
as
them
well.
the ability.
I mean,
give them the ability to breathe underwater. That would be handy.
Exactly. Yeah. Why do you need to build on the thing that already exists? Just redo it. And even if you take something that already exists, and so that also circumvents their whole argument of like, well, why would he have to create something totally new? Well, he's not. And even with code, you know, because they always go back to code, like, oh, it's just like a designer borrowing code from someone else. Well, yeah, a fish fin is already existing code. If you want to think about it that way, just take that from over here and stick it on a whale.
Yeah, that would.
Why would I mean? You're only using things that already exist. Why are you having to build an arm into a flipper? Where is the sense in that? I don't understand. Anyway, all right. Page 108. The earliest records. Quote, it is commonly assumed that when evolutionists talk about man as being on Earth for hundreds of thousands of years and reject the shorter period that the Bible gives, they have evidence to prove it. Even Nobel Prize-winning nuclear physicist W.F. Libby, a pioneer in radiocarbon dating, assumed this. Note what he says in the March 3rd, 1961 issue of Science. Quote, the research in the development of the dating technique consisted of two stages, dating of samples from the historic and the prehistoric epochs, respectively. Arnold, a coworker, and I had our first shock when our advisors informed us that history extended back only for 5,000 years. You read statements to the effect that such and such a society or archaeological site is 20,000 years old. We learned rather abruptly that these numbers, these ancient ages, are not known accurately. In fact, the earliest historical date that has been established with any degree of certainty is about the time of the first dynasty in Egypt, close quote. The fact that man's records go back no farther, should be further, than what the Bible allows, about 6,000 years, is repeatedly acknowledged. World Book Encyclopedia says, quote, the earliest records we have of human history go back only about 5,000 years, close quote. The Encyclopedia Americana says, quote, social evolution in man, however, has occupied not more than 10,000 years. Most of it has happened in the last 6,000 years, close quote. Biology for Today states, concerning the age of metals, quote, this era began about 5,000 years ago and extends to our present day, close quote. Review Text in Biology declares, quote, the invention of writing about 6,000 years ago ushered in the historic period of man. The time prior to 6,000 years ago is known as the prehistoric period, close quote. In Man, His First Million Years, we read, quote, the earliest written language, Sumerian cuneiform, goes back to about 3,500 BC, close quote. Okay, let's talk about that. So there's a bit of sleight of hand going on here. So there's a difference between saying history goes back and an archaeological site is dated at. There is a difference. So when they say history, what they're meaning is, or history, they're meaning written history. Because remember, to this very day, prehistoric tribes still exist. They are still in existence. Prehistoric simply means before having written history. So there are tribes in Africa, in South America, in Australia, that don't have written histories. They are definitionally prehistoric, and they're around today. You don't have to have lived 100,000 years ago to be considered prehistoric. That's not what that word means. Peter, I don't know what you're saying.
Sorry, I was muted. No matter where you date the creation event in the Bible, because some will say 6,000, others will say 10,000. Right. If there is if there's a civilization that was prehistoric, they're dated before the creation event in the Bible, which is a historic fact according to you. So people did exist. Where did they come from? Where did they live in this earth that wasn't there?
They're just vibing in empty space. Well, remember, the earth existed for some unknown amount of time, but it was just formless and void.
Also,
how long it existed.
Also a thing, depending on the creationist you talk to, because some will say it didn't, and others will say it did.
Right. It was created ex nihilo.
Yeah. But if you read the creation story correctly, yes, Earth already existed, and there's also the reference that the Spirit of God hovered over the water, which is because people didn't know what air was. The Spirit of God was the air over the surface of the earth. It's Bronze Age mythology, and people today think it's actual science. That is just, we need to do better in our educational system, because
yes, we do. Sorry. Okay, there we go. Yep. Yes, you are correct. Absolutely. So, and it does actually say that in here, in this book at least, it says that the Earth existed for some time before there were humans, but it says humans definitely arose about 6,000 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
So yes, history. So written history only extends back about 5,000 years. Okay. Maybe that's true. I'm not entirely sure, but there are archaeological sites that are older than that. So I was looking up just before the show. Göbekli Tepe, which is one of the oldest sites, exists or extends. It became abandoned about 10,000 years ago. So it existed before 10,000 years ago, but it was abandoned 10,000 years ago. So I don't know how long it existed before that. Another Murgar in India, and we talk about this in The Farmer's Tale, also was abandoned about 9,000, or I think it was abandoned about 9,000 years ago, or maybe it dates back about 9,000 years ago. I don't quite remember, but it goes back to about 9,000 years, whichever it is. So that's, again, before the universe was created, before we have the earliest record of language. Now, the thing about language is culture is really hard to fossilize.
Mm-hmm.
That's you have houses and clay pots and stuff like that, and it's easier to fossilize these things, but actual written records, that's going to be a lot harder to protect and keep for long periods of time, because whatever you have these things written on may degrade. If it's on pages, it might degrade due to water or fire or whatever, or clay tablets or something like that. Maybe they get brittle with age and they shatter, and then you can't read them anymore, stuff like that. So yeah, that happens. I'm not surprised really that language only goes back about that far. So I'm really not surprised by that. We have spotty records of different civilizations going back thousands of years, right? Because you have some of their stuff and you can glean a little bit about their archaeological history, but not what their language was.
Mm-hmm.
Or maybe it's like a tiny bit of art or something like that. The caves in France go back, I think, a few was it a couple thousand years ago, or I'm actually drawing a blank. Let me look. It's like Lascaux, I think. Yes, Lascaux. So how old was the art in that. I'm looking. Let's go in France. So this is dated at, if the internet will move, 17,000 years. So the art at Lascaux Cave, the Lascaux Caves, is 17,000 years old. That's a little bit before humans were around, apparently, before the Earth was created.
As I said, I'm Dutch, and so my mind works differently. I think we have just come up with cold hard evidence that Trump is actually Jesus who came back to Earth. Because if all of this is true, if we have all these civilizations and they abandoned their sites, that is just God buying up the property because he needs to create Earth and he needs the land. So yeah, God is like Trump. So moving people off of their property, buying up the real estate, and then being able to create his magnificent Earth, and then sending his son Donald J back in time. I think it's entirely believable.
The history of America is just moving people off their land and buying up the land. So yeah. I mean, there you go.
See, it works.
He works in mysterious ways.
Yes.
Again, yeah, the earliest records we have of human history. Again, the earliest records.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, all of these are just saying that the records, the things that humans made, like wrote, only go back about 6,000 years or so. Okay. All right, fine. I'm not, again, that doesn't shock me. We have tools, though. We have stone tools that go way before, way back before 6,000 years. They go back hundreds of thousands of years. Actually, I think over 1 million years.
I'm close. I'm close to Germany, and again, I'm Dutch, so I apologize in advance. We have dildos from 10 to 12,000 years old. Stone dildos. So yeah. Oh. Those are a thing.
That's a trip.
Those are a thing.
So, men have been, underperforming for 10,000 years, I guess,
I mean, yes, and it obviously was the Germans who came up with that because they're German.
Yeah.
We have to be meticulous in the design of this thing that is going to pleasure our women. And it apparently it did.
All right. Is there anything else we want to say about that section? Or are we ready for the next section?
Let's not elaborate on where we just ended. Okay. We might get canceled.
So, we're already canceled. All right. Next. Page 109. Quote, "These are what men offer as facts, but note how evolutionists add to these facts their speculations in Biology and Its Relation to Mankind, 1964, by A.M. Winchester. Quote, it is a common error to think of man's existence in terms of recorded history. Historical records go back to about 3000 BC, but this is only a small fraction of the time man has lived on Earth." Well, okay. That's literally what we were just saying. So, all right, fair enough. Continuing. In Man, His First Million Years, 1957, by A. Montague, quote, "Recorded history is no more than 6,000 years old, whereas human beings have been making history ever since they have been on this earth, a period believed to be about 1 million years," close quote. In Biology and Human Progress, by L. Eisman and C. Tanzer, quote, this is a very weird way of citing books. "In the last 6,000 years, man has advanced far more rapidly than he did in the million or more years of his prehistoric existence," close quote. "It is well to note why the last 6,000 years is called the historic period of man. In this period, it has been proved that man existed. Science has the facts, the records, documents, cities, monuments, writings, and other artifacts to verify it. But before that period, man did not leave such evidence of his existence. That is why it is called prehistoric. But the entire idea of a prehistoric period for man is based solely on assumption, speculation. It is pure theory. devised to support another theory, evolution. Let's just keep going. That man is a relative newcomer but was equipped for rapid development can be seen from such findings as that noted in New Discoveries in Babylonia about Genesis. The author, P.J. Wiseman, says, quote, no more surprising fact has been discovered by recent excavation than the suddenness with which civilization appeared in the world. This discovery is the very opposite to that anticipated. It was expected that the more ancient the period, the more primitive would excavators find it to be, until traces of civilization ceased altogether and aboriginal man appeared. Neither in Babylonia nor Egypt, the lands of the oldest known habitations of man, has this been the case, close quote. But is not the generation by generation increase in knowledge that has been characteristic of the historic period proof of evolution? No, not if by evolution we mean the changing of of one kind of life into another kind. The ancient Babylonians, Egyptians, and Greeks, thousands of years ago, were as natively intelligent as our generation. What they lacked was the vast storehouse of accumulated knowledge to draw on that we have today. Building on the knowledge of others is not organic evolution. It is simply progress, the ability to do so being created within man from the beginning. Oh, we're getting into some consciousness stuff. That's interesting. All right, let's talk about this. So I just want to point out that we do have fossils of modern humans, of anatomically modern humans, going back to what is it? I think it's 100,000 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
I think is when archaic Homo sapien evolved into anatomically modern Homo sapien. It was about 100,000 years ago, I think, if I remember correctly. So yeah, we have fossils that stretch that entire period of humans. So briefly, and if you want the full details on this, you can go watch our series, The Ancestor's Tale. We talk about all this stuff. So briefly, humans, Homo sapiens, left Africa between 50 and 60,000 years ago. We see the earliest evidence of humans outside of Africa, of Homo sapiens, outside of Africa, like in the Arabian Peninsula and beyond, between 50 and 60,000 years ago. That's when we see that flowering out of Africa. Before that, Homo sapiens were exclusively in Africa. And their fossils go back, I think it's about 300,000 years or so. And then prior to that, we have Homo erectus, which is, we either descend, or I think Homo heidelbergensis. We descended from Homo heidelbergensis and then Homo erectus before that. And Homo erectus was also in Africa originally and then spread out to the rest of the world. Or that's one of the hypotheses. There's also a hypothesis that they may have started in Asia and then spread to Africa. Either way, Homo sapiens originated in Africa. And we have very good genetic, archaeological, and paleontological evidence in support of that. It's very, very good. But so this is hundreds of thousands of years. And so what they're trying to say in this book is historical records only go back a few thousands of years, which they do. Therefore, humans have only been around that long. And that's just nonsense. It's just abject nonsense. So there was a period, or some authors, some archaeologists like to say there was a great period of social evolution within about the last 50 to 60,000 years. And they call that, what is it, the Great Leap, I think, or something like that. If I remember correctly. But what it actually shows, as more archaeological data has accumulated, is that this so-called Great Leap wasn't really that great. It was building on earlier, like we see the evolution of these technological industries, like tools, like stone tools, and they change gradually over time. So it's not so much that there was nothing, then all of a sudden here it is. You have this gradual chain of evolution happening. And so
on the other hand, I mean, leaps in evolution, we've seen that. I mean, people at some point people started farming and everything changed.
Right.
Even if we look to more recent history, Uh, it's little over 100 years ago that we got our first cars, and that
Right.
we had the steam era. And now look at what's happened with the industrial revolution. We have the
Right.
internet. That is in a really short amount of time. So it would be,
Yes.
if we were creationists, and over in, let's say, in a couple of thousand years, people would say, well, that couldn't have happened because that was in such, why didn't people before the 20th century, why didn't they have internet? I mean, what's up with
Where
that?
was the prehistoric internet?
Yes, where was the prehistoric internet? If humans existed, they should have had internet, right? I mean,
It's called Internet Explorer.
yes. I mean, and
Yeah.
I'm saying this proudly, coming from the town that gave the world both Bluetooth and Wi-Fi. That came from my town. Just wanted to say that.
Nice.
That's, yeah. we have a university here that does some cool things. And then we have obviously the Dutch people who come up with the names. So the wife of the guy who invented Wi-Fi came up with the term Wi-Fi because she thought it sounded catchy like hi-fi, and that's literally a thing. It doesn't mean anything.
Well, yeah.
Wi-Fi has no explanation. It just sounded cool.
Isn't that the word for like a stereo?
Yes.
In French, it's like un chenille or something like that.
It's high fidelity sound.
Yeah.
That's high
Yeah,
fi.
that's right.
And so
Right.
we now have a wireless fidelity internet, according to the woman who came up with it.
Wireless fidelity.
Yeah. It doesn't mean anything.
Yeah, you're right. But you're right. There, this social evolution, in a sense, although Chomsky would argue, I guess not to call it like social evolution, it's more social change, because it's not like allele frequencies changing. But yeah, you're right. It's very, very rapid because we are accumulating knowledge so fast at this point that we can it's just snowballing basically. But yeah, and for some things, the change from like the before period to the after period would have required such a small change that it would have seemed geologically like instantaneous, basically. When you go from one layer to another, because if you're a hunter gatherer people, for instance, and maybe you recognize that if you leave some seeds over here in part of your range, and then you come back next year, later in that year, if you come back later in that year as part of your range, and you see now they're all grown and you can harvest them, it's a very short jump from there to why don't we just stay here and grow these year round?
Yes.
That's a very short jump. And so how would you even recognize that point, that shift in the fossil record? You probably wouldn't. It would look exactly the same, right? So yeah,
the only thing,
I'm not surprised.
Only thing you would notice is that from that point on, you get bigger settlements because people would settle in a specific place, and then you would find, hey, they settle along the banks of rivers. Why is that? Probably because stuff grows there, right? I mean, it's and we can see that through history, and yeah, it's so incredibly obvious that there is a lot more going on before we had written history, before people had I mean, even if they would have had written history, nothing would have been left if they traveled from one place to another. It wouldn't accumulate.
Or even if we had written history, there's no guarantee that it would even be comprehensible to us.
Yes.
It would be, in a language that's extremely distantly related to anything around today.
Yeah.
So even if we did find something from that period, how would we even recognize?
It could be. It could be
it says,
Yeah, it could be like hieroglyphs that they just used symbols to convey things.
Right.
So,
There's a question. Did you get a new camera, Peter?
Yeah, I always look sharp. On chair. You know
That's true.
that.
You do always look sharp.
You know that.
That's true.
By the way, good to see you, on chair. No, it's my old camera. I just keep fiddling with settings and stuff in OBS to make it look better. So the whole thing where it looks like it's an actual camera instead of a webcam, that's all done with OBS magic. As is the sound.
Was there anything else? Is there anything else that you want to add on this section before we move on to the next? Because I think it's really just kind of the same stuff.
I think we pretty much covered everything.
All right.
I'm just
okay. So we'll go to the next section, which is degeneration.
Oh, goody! Now we're going to get to my people, the degenerates.
This is going to be interesting. Some of this stuff is, I was watching a Noam Chomsky talk the other day, and he's big into the consciousness literature and that sort of stuff. One day I'd like to do a series on this channel on consciousness, on like animal behavior and all that sort of stuff, because I think a lot of it's fascinating, and it's really interesting, because I'll say, human language is extremely different from the communication system of like any other organism on this planet. The way that other primates do language is not like we do language. They don't have syntax like we do. They have like, fruit or eagle or leopard or snake. Now they may have different words for these things. And interestingly, some monkeys and things can actually recognize what the word for something means from a different species. And it turns out actually some birds can do that too. So a bird will like hear a monkey say the word for like snake, and that confers a different reaction in the bird than if the monkey said like leopard, something like that. And so we know there's this sort of cross, linguistic talking between different primates and even birds too. But neither birds nor bats nor primates nor any other animals that make noise do language like we do. And it's not like, and I'd be very surprised, I think, to find like that there was sort of a gradual buildup from this like just nouns basically that other animals have to the very complex syntax that we have. I bet that it was not a gradual buildup, that there was something relatively quick that happened in our evolution that resulted in that. But anyway, all right.
One thing before we go into degeneration, that is happening with the language right now, because there are people who are refusing to use pronouns. So there is that.
Yes. Did you see my conversation with the guy the other day?
Yes.
For anyone who's not aware, a guy, what did he say? Was he I think it was a creationist, I think. And I commented, and he said, pronouns in bio, your opinion is dismissed. The first two words in his bio were pronouns.
Yes.
He said he, who, something. I don't remember what else it was.
I saw that.
My guy, you also have pronouns.
Yeah.
My brother in Christ, you also have pronouns in your bio. It's like, I don't get it. He blocked me, by the way, immediately thereafter. So
yeah, these people are so incredibly weird. I mean, yeah, you can't address a person the way they want to be addressed. I mean, let's start. No, if it's a Christian, let's start calling him a Muslim, and if it's a Muslim, let's start calling him a Christian, and see what happens. I'm pretty sure they're going to get annoyed over time that you're not addressing them the way they want to be addressed, because that's
their
the thing.
Preferred adjectives. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
can you imagine trying to speak without using pronouns? So like, imagine trying to speak without using pronouns. You can't say I you, he, she, it, we, they. No, like so many of the most common like words in language, and you just can't say any of them. It's very frustrating.
It would be devastating.
Frustrating.
It would be devastating for the conspiracy theory community if they can't use they anymore.
Right.
Ooh, who are they going to blame? Oh, damn, you can't use who either.
No, it's like 9/11 happened. How?
Yeah.
9/11 just happened.
Happened.
It's like, yeah. Yeah, my gosh, it's so. Oh man, I'm thinking about it right now.
It's just as if these people don't think, Jackson. I think that's what we can take away from this. They don't think.
Yeah, the unknown, unidentified group of people plotting against the people opposed to.
There is
recursive.
There is a benefit.
Have to be so recursive.
I mean, there's a benefit from this because if they now have to make posts on social media, they'll have to think so long and so hard that the post will never make it. So yeah, let's have these people.
The sentence becomes like super recursive at that point. It's
well, it's
the people who are the people opposed, because you can't say who, the people opposed to those individuals. You know, it's ridiculous. Yeah, no, you never finish a thought, right?
Yeah,
you would can't finish a thought. Yeah. Anyway, okay, let's get back to this. Page 111. Quote, in Science World of February 1st, 1961, this matter is commented on in this way. Quote, contrary to popular belief, man has long since ceased to evolve. Okay. Present day man, the human being that we are, does not differ essentially from the human being who lived 100,000 years ago. The whole of that part of man's history which has gone by since those faraway ages has not, or has scarcely, altered our species. The enormous difference which nonetheless exists between the ancient flint chipper and his modern heir is entirely the work of civilization, of the culture accumulated and transmitted by social tradition. If by some miracle it were possible to fetch a newborn child of that past age into our own time and bring him up as one of our own, one of ours, he would become a man exactly like us, close quote. The Encyclopedia Americana states in this regard, quote, most of what is popularly regarded as evolution of man is social, not biological evolution. Almost none of the human social evolution has been biological evolution, close quote. Sure, I agree with that. That the ancients already had a high brain capacity is demonstrated by this item in the New York Times about a discovery in Iraq. Quote, schoolboys of the Little Sumerian County seat of Shadapur, I guess, about 2000 BC had a textbook with the solution of Euclid's classic triangle problem 17 centuries before Euclid. Clay textbooks of the schoolboys of Shadapur contain an encyclopedic outline of the scientific knowledge of their time, which will necessitate a sharper vision of the history of the development of science and, accordingly, of the story of the development of the human mind. It suggests that mathematics reached a stage of development about 2000 BC that archaeologists and historians of science had never imagined possible. This harmonizes completely with the Bible account. It also helps to explain why an aborigine today, almost in a prehistoric condition, can be educated within one generation to take his place in our complicated human society. His brain is not inferior, but his accumulated knowledge is. When he is exposed to proper education, he advances much like any other human. It has always been so from man's creation nearly 6,000 years ago. So, broadly speaking, I actually agree with most of this. I agree that biologically we're not super different from humans that lived 100,000 years ago. I mean, that's what they were anatomically modern humans. So morphologically, they look like us. They had a brain size that was about the same size as ours. So yeah, that's fine. Social evolution is not biological evolution. Yeah, I agree with that. It makes an interesting point actually down here at the bottom. about this solution to Euclid's problem. There was a Dawkins posted way back that there was a man in the Islamic world who kind of independently came up with natural selection. Now, he didn't substantiate it to the same extent as Darwin did, but the fact that he came up with it, decades or centuries, I think it was centuries before Darwin did, is impressive, right? And the fact that I don't know who he was, I don't remember his name, tells you something, right? Mm-hmm. But that's kind of a product of our Western chauvinism, I think, to an extent, right? There was I read a book, not the Swallows of Kabul, 1,000 Splendid Suns. There we go, which takes place in Afghanistan, and one of the characters mentions that there is a story of star-crossed lovers in the Islamic world long before Shakespeare wrote Romeo and Juliet. Well, sure. In our Western society, we look at the Western scholars, right? We don't look so much at the scholars of the Islamic world or the scholars of the Eastern world, unless you specifically take a class that goes into these things, right? Unless you take a class on like philosophy, which has a section on Eastern philosophy and how it differs from Western philosophy, or you take a history of the world class where you specifically talk about the Islamic world or what have you. But yeah, we don't see these things all that much. And also, I mean, another thing to point out in fairness is that the guy who came up with that idea of natural selection, it never really went anywhere, right? Like he came up with it, yeah, but it just kind of fizzled out. It's not like he wasn't.
But it's significant though. It's significant because if he came up with it, I mean, yeah, people try to figure out how we got here, how nature works,
yeah,
and the fact that two people independently from each other over a vast period of time came up with the same idea, that should tell you something. By the way,
yes, absolutely.
I don't want to interrupt you, but there is a good question in the side chat, which leads me to the whale sex thing. This could be a good video for you to make, actually. Anger asked,
thank you.
Is there someone who is widely considered the authority in interspecies linguistics? That would be a cool video to figure out. See if you can get someone on your channel to talk about that.
That would be interesting. Linguistics is a very interesting field, and I'd love to get a linguist on. I'd love to get someone who is all into linguistics and all that sort of stuff on here and talk about the evolution of language. Interspecies linguistics. So the bird I was specifically referring to earlier, I'll put it here in the side chat, is called the yellow casqued hornbill. Yellow casqued hornbill. The yellow casqued hornbill.
Didn't you play with one of those quite recently, or am I mistaken?
I did, yes. No, I did. I got to play with penguins, the yellow casqued hornbill, which, fun fact, so there's only 2 of these in captivity in the entire world, and I got to pet one of them. So I thought that was really neat.
Yes, that was.
Also, Jamie E. points out Al-Jahiz is the Islamic scholar that I was thinking of, the one who independently came up with natural selection. So thank you. But yes, Aunt Jer, yes, we will look into getting a linguist on. Actually, Dapper is really big into linguistics, but maybe we could have him on when we talk to like an actual linguist or something. That'd be fun.
It's really sad because I've been thrown off Twitter a couple of times because I can't keep my mouth shut to certain people, and but a couple of years ago, I had lots of interactions with a guy who was into linguistics and could explain the evolution of all the languages, and he made a chart and everything for me to this was something that came up during a conversation that I had on YouTube, and I have since lost the chart, and I have no way of finding him back on Twitter. This guy had so much information on the evolution of language, and so yeah, I'm really chuffed that I can't get in touch with this guy anymore, because it is something that would interest me in how this works, and the whole.
Yeah.
So we need to find someone who does interspecies linguistics, though. That would be really cool. That would
So yeah, that bird I put in there, I was looking up information on him, because after I had gotten to interact with this very strange looking bird, which makes some very interesting sounds, I looked it up, and that's how I found that paper that talks about how it listens to what the monkeys are saying, and it has different reactions to different sounds that the monkeys make. And so I'll have to go back and look at that paper again. But yeah, that was something I thought was very, very neat. And there are other examples like that where monkeys will listen to each other and hear, like, what's the word for leopard versus the word for snake, and that sort of stuff. But yeah, we should definitely get a linguist on at some point. That'd be real fun.
Yeah.
Yeah,
because these things. So the birds reacting to the language of monkeys. I mean, they would notice a certain sound and then the behavior of the monkeys. So for another species to learn what that sound means wouldn't be that hard, because the monkeys would react differently to a snake than a leopard.
Right.
So. And there's so much that I would want to know about all of that. So we need to combine
animal
our forces.
Signaling is a very broad topic. I mean, one of the cool things about animal signaling, in my opinion, is there are animal signals that make no sounds at all. So when you look at a brightly colored salamander or brightly colored fish, your brain thinks toxic, right? Because your ancestors who recognized this thing is toxic were the ones who survived, and your ancestors who didn't were the ones who ate it and died.
Yeah.
And so you can test this with like predators. So one of my favorite experiments concerns the filefish called the scrawled leather jacket filefish, Paraleuteres prionuris. So what the researchers did was, well, I guess backstory. The mimic leather jacket filefish. The scrawled filefish is something different. Getting my fish mixed up. The mimic leather jacket filefish is called the mimic because it looks almost exactly like the sharp-nosed pufferfish, and they live in the same area. They look very similar to each other. Now, the sharp-nosed pufferfish, which is Canthagastra valentini, is poisonous. Pufferfish are typically poisonous. That's why if you order fugu, they have to prepare it very carefully, or it's your last meal.
Yeah.
And so it has a particular look, and the mimic filefish has evolved the exact same color pattern to look like that pufferfish, because if it looks like a pufferfish, then predators are going to leave it alone. They're going to see the coloration and think, aha, not food, so I'm not going to mess with it. And that's called Batesian mimicry. So basically you have a prey species that has evolved to look like a dangerous species. That's Batesian mimicry. There's also Malarian mimicry, where you have different poisonous or venomous species that all evolve to look like each other. And that happens, it's mostly with poisonous species. It happens with like poison dart frogs in the Amazon, and like butterflies and things like that. And there are other different types of mimicry. They're all very, very interesting. I highly recommend reading about them. But the point is, so these researchers they said, what if we can design a model that looks like the pufferfish, but a little bit less like the pufferfish? So it's mostly looks like it, but not quite. And then what if we design one that looks even less like the coloration of the pufferfish, and even less like the coloration? So they made a gradient from looks exactly like the pufferfish to, looks progressively less like the pufferfish to just normal silverfish on the other side. And they tested the rate of attacks on models that look increasingly less like the pufferfish. And what they found was the rate of attacks increase the less you look like the pufferfish.
Mm-hmm.
So even if you look just a little bit like the pufferfish, you're actually less likely to get attacked than if you look nothing like the pufferfish.
Yeah.
And so what that tells you is the fish, that the predatory fish in this environment are internalizing or have internalized the danger sense. And so any fish that looks like a pufferfish is going to get some degree of protection just by looking a little bit like it. So the entire gradient is adaptively beneficial. The whole thing, it's all the way up adaptively beneficial. And that's why it's one of my favorite studies. I just think it's really, really cool that they did this.
Well, so when I was young, I used to visit the Museum of Natural History every weekend. I had a year pass where I could just walk in. And one of the things that fascinated me was mimicry. The insects and what do you call them? Stick insects in English?
Yeah.
Yeah. I found those fascinating, and so at some point, one of the guys who worked there said, "Well, I can get you a few. All you need is a tank, but keep them confined so they don't get out because, I mean, here in the Netherlands, we've got lots of plants in the house, and obviously, what happened? They got out, and the whole house was infested with tiny little stick insects all across every plant in the living room, which didn't please my mother too well. And I got offered the ones that looked like dead leaves. And my mother wouldn't allow any more insects into the house after the outbreak of the stick insects. So yeah, that was
the outbreak incident of 1973.
Yeah, it could have been around. Yeah, wait, I was 12. I was 12, so it would have been 1974. You were really close there. I mean, I started going there when I was 11, and this happened when I was either 12 or 13. So you were really, really close.
Yeah, their mimicry is wild. The plant mimics. There are even and that's the story of how Peter got evicted. Yes.
Yeah.
The plant mimicry is wild. So I was reading one study on it was stick insects, and their colors, the colors that they have, they've switched between these different or in these different lineages. So when these stick insects, and this was the genus Tamima, when they would live on certain plants that had like needle-like leaves, they had stripes, which would help them blend in with the little needle leaves. But if the plants had these broad leaves, then they didn't have the stripe pattern because they could blend in with the big leaves, which I thought was really neat. There's this insect called the peacock katydid. It looks like a dead leaf. There are different mantids. And you know what? Where is brain bug? Here we are talking about insects, and brain bug is not here.
Yes.
For shame. Well, anyway, so there are different mantids. Some look like leaves. Some look like orchids. They're wild looking. And so, yeah, mimicry is really interesting. There's actually, so in Climbing Mount Improbable, Dawkins discusses a beetle that looks like a termite. Actually, the beetle itself doesn't look like a termite. The back end of its abdomen, so you got the head, the thorax, and the abdomen. The back end of the abdomen looks sort of kinda like a termite. And what it does is it actually flips its abdomen over its body. And so the termite looking bit is really big and it covers the body. So he sneaks into the termite mound looking sort of kind of like a termite. It's very wild. It only looks like a termite though from like the side. It doesn't really look like it from the top, which is kind of funny. But the termites, of course, are only seeing it from the side as they're passing by him, you know? So It's really interesting, in my opinion.
Those things I find those incredibly cool. The fact that nature came up with this, and it's so easy to explain, but it's so wonderful to explore the many things
Yes.
that have happened. I mean, it's all across animal and plant life where things mimic each other in order to survive, and it's really cool.
There are I'm drawing a blank on the name. There's a plant in, I think it's South America, because it's with the heliconius butterflies. So there's this big group of species of heliconius butterflies, and they lay their eggs on these certain plants. Well, some species of these particular plants have developed little nodules that look like eggs, that look like heliconius eggs. And the reason is, when the heliconius are first born, they cannibalize each other. And so if one of the butterflies sees that, they'll think, oh, I'm going to lay my eggs after somebody else, so their eggs will eat or their offspring will eat my eggs. And so they don't lay their eggs on these or plants, or they're less likely to lay their eggs on these plants because they have these little nodules on them. Or what's another one? It's another fun one. There are, lots of beetles that look like tree bark and stuff like that. There's actually, in the fossil record, there is an insect that looks like moss. I don't remember what moss it was, but I'm drawing a blank on the name right now. Dapper and I talk about him in the evolution process series. Oh, and there's also the leaf fish. They look like dead leaves, and they're in the Amazon. They really do. Like, if you just see them, like, close their eyes, they look like leaves. It's crazy. But yeah, there's this thing called mimicry. So mimicry is when different lineages of insects evolve to look like, or not necessarily just insects, some spiders have done it too, different arthropods, evolve to look like ants. They just evolved to look like ants. And the reason is, if you look like an ant, then a lot of times other insects will leave you alone, because ants have formic acid, and most insects don't like that. Mm-hmm. So if you see what looks like an ant, you're going to think to yourself, I don't want to eat that. It's not going to taste good. So you just leave it alone. And this happens. There was a test with some spiders where one spider has evolved to look like an ant. And so this bigger predatory spider actually leaves him alone in favor of eating other types of spiders because they don't look like ants. So yeah, that's a whole thing. It's called mimicry. There's also, so we were talking about Batesian mimicry and Müllerian mimicry, which is how, so Batesian is when a prey thing comes to look like a dangerous thing, and then Müllerian mimicry is when two dangerous things look like each other, which is an honest signal. So Müllerian is an honest signal, Batesian is a dishonest signal. The opposite of Batesian mimicry is called aggressive mimicry. And aggressive mimicry is when a predator evolves to look like a prey species, or a harmless species, I guess I should say. A dangerous species evolves to look like a harmless species. And now, of course, the reason for that is it allows you to get close to whatever your prey item is and eat that. And so there's a wrasse, and this wrasse actually has the same coloration as the pufferfish mentioned earlier, Canthagastra valentini, the sharp nose, but only when it's small can it actually use this, because it gets too big and then doesn't matter. The coloration doesn't matter. It's really big. There are others. I think it's Hypoplectrus is the name of it, which is another type of fish, and a bunch of different members of this genus Hypoplectrus have evolved to look like other fish, and they do that so they can get close to prey species and then eat them. Which is really neat. So yeah, mimicry is crazy, but it's also really interesting that you have, so like evolutionary arms races. So you have a some adaptation towards looking slightly like something else, and then you have a predator who gets better at seeing that thing, or at discerning that you're not what you're trying to be, what you're trying to look like. And so they get a little bit better at trying to look like this thing, then the predator gets better at identifying them, and so on and so on. It's just this back and forth. And so you wind up making all sorts of crazy stuff. And that's how you get like cuckoos who parasitize on particular birds. They'll actually evolve to have their eggs look more like those of the species they're parasitizing. So if they're parasitizing like a bird that has like small eggs with gold speckles, then the closer their eggs look like that, the closer their eggs look like small gold speckles, the more likely they are to pass their genes on to the next generation. So there's that selective pressure. But then the converse of that is those birds who are getting parasitized will become better at figuring out which ones are their eggs. And so there's this interplay back and forth. Sounds like the battle between National Treasury and counterfeiters. Yes, absolutely. Yeah. It's the same sort of process. Or like hackers, trying to hack programs, because as they get better at hacking the program, your people making the firewall and whatever else have to get better at protecting your programs. Yeah. And so, yeah, it's exactly right.
And then you have the people who get caught up in that and make software that is completely legitimate. They're going to be caught by your firewall because something in their software resembles something in the malicious software, and so they have to adapt.
Right.
So, yeah, we see that all over the place.
Yes. One of the things that we mentioned in the Beaver's Tale, and Peter, I'm sure you appreciate the Beaver's Tale because we talk about both beavers and hanging tits. So,
sorry,
I'm sure you appreciate it.
Yes, I hadn't watched it yet, but now it's moved up on top of the
top of the list.
Top of the list.
Yeah.
I mean, who wouldn't want to watch that?
Exactly right. Yes. Well, one of the things we discussed in the Beaver's Tale is Ophiocordyceps unilateralis, which is a fungus. So Ophiocordyceps, some of you probably heard of it. It parasitizes ants. So the spores get on an ant, and it's mycelia, which is like the equivalent of roots for fungi, basically. Get into the ant and cause it to go on a random walk until it ends up going on a leaf that hangs over the other ants, and then it bites down into this leaf, and the spore grows out of it. And then once the spore is mature, once the fruiting body is mature, it rains down its spores on the other ants. So those infect more ants, and then they do the same thing. And so the broadly, so Ophiocordyceps is a member of unilateralis, who specifies a single or only a couple species of ants is what it attacks. But Ophiocordyceps as a genus attacks lots of different arthropods, and the larger group that it's in also attacks lots of different arthropods. So it's like getting more and more specific as it has gone on through evolutionary time. And that happens with lots of different parasites. You get better and better and better at parasitizing one specific host. So if you're a nematode and originally your group parasitized like all primates, well, over time you come to parasitize like just chimpanzees or something like that. So that happens. Well, we're nearly to the end. Peter, what's going on your channel? What's happening over there?
On my channel, there wasn't much. So I had something to deal with, which was my dog for the past few weeks. So I didn't do an awful lot. I'm going to pick up things pretty soon, I hope. In the meantime, what we do is every 2 weeks I'm part of a panel on Discord, and I really should set things up so that I will be streaming that to my own channel as well. It's a group of people that go on Discord and basically the title of the show is, can you convince us that a god or goddess exists or gods exist? And that's a really fun show to do because we get lots of people with all kinds of questions and propositions. And even though it's on Discord, we don't get an awful lot of trolls. There's one guy, he speaks like, I don't know, somewhere between Marvin the Martian and Kermit the Frog. That's kind of his voice. who will come and hassle us every single time, saying that we don't have an explanation for abiogenesis. I keep hassling him that he has an article on his famous Catsboard blog.
Yes. Yeah.
Where he has this thing about Adam and Eve being real, and then linking to a newspaper article that said, did science just confirm Adam and Eve? And that links to a scientific paper that basically is an explanation for abiogenesis, not Adam and Eve. But he still links it. And yeah, so I get to annoy him with that. Other than that,
oh, good.
I do every weekend. I do 2 shows for Arn Ra, and Arn Ra is getting far too much fun with this because I just got an email. He now calls it blasphemy and bowel of movement lessons. I'm not even kidding. That's the title of the email. This is obviously the Blasphemer's Bible that we do on Saturday. And then on Sunday, we are reading Joseph's Myth, which is a nice play on words. And that's where we read the Book of Mormon. And people have said we should call it the Book of Mormon. I think reading Joseph's Myths is a lot better as a title. Little less insulting, yet covers it. And those are 2 of my favorite shows at the moment. I mean, we have an It Came to Pass counter on reading Joseph's Myths because obviously you'll have to have that. The overuse of the the KJV-like English language in the Book of Mormon is just ridiculous. But yeah, so that's what I'm doing currently, and I'm really hoping to get back. I have a couple of interesting guests that I really need to set things up with, both atheists and theists. So, yeah, people can keep an eye out from that. And when it comes to gods, I do have another notch in my belt because my artwork recently was featured on the YouTube channel of an actual goddess, the goddess Hathor, of Stargate SG-1 fame. So I made a teaser. I made a teaser for one of her shows, and that resulted in emailing back and forth. And she actually showed the teaser on her show, which, as a Stargate fan, yeah, that's cool. Having your artwork.
Very nice. Absolutely.
Yes.
That's awesome. Also, Nestlig and Bent, hello. How you guys doing?
Another Dutchie in the chat.
Well, let's see. Yep, another Dutch in the chat. Well, let's see. What's we also have an interview on here next month. I think that's the 20th. I think.
I closed. I had it up. I closed the screen. I forgot.
Oh, well, hold on one sec. I think I can find it. The 20th. Yeah, the 20th. Yes. So October 20th, we're going to have, and I'm going to butcher his name.
Yeah. Now I'm curious how you.
Trio.
Inaki Ruiz.
That's how I pronounce it.
Yeah, Inaki Ruiz.
It's like, but he's got the the symbol over the end, so it's like Iñaki. I think it's Iñaki Ruiz Trio. Anyway, so he's a biologist. He specializes in like the evolution of multicellularity. So we're gonna have him on talk about how multicellularity evolves and all that sort of fun stuff. That'll be a really cool chat. I'm excited because I've read some of his papers and he's on Twitter now. And so I reached out to him and was like, hey, you want to come on? And he said, sure. So yeah, we'll be chatting with him next month. That'll be fun. As Nestling knows, the next video in our Ancestors' Tale series is the Hippo's Tale. And I frankly don't understand the distribution of likes to or views, whatever, with regard to these videos. Some of the videos get a lot of views in the Ancestors' Tale series. Some don't. I don't know what people like and what they don't. It's very strange to me. So like the Mouse's Tale didn't do very well. And I mean, it was all right. I thought it was fine. And the Beaver's Tale has been doing better.
I'm going to say it because just imagine what would have happened if you had named the Beaver's Tale the Hanging Tits Tale. Imagine the amount of views you would have gotten. I mean,
YouTube would have probably banned it before it even went out. But it would have been a great name. Also, well, if it were the Hanging Tits, it would have been much later in the series because we don't meet birds till way later. So, but yeah, that would have been quite a name. So the Hippo's Tale is next. And I get to talk about some stuff. I don't know. I haven't, to answer your question, that's like, I have not decided yet as to whether or not I'll have other people. I haven't decided yet. But we'll see. I'll figure it out next month. But anyway, so the Hippo's Tale, so that's coming up. We'll be talking about the evolution of hippos and whales and all that sort of fun stuff. And then after that is like the Seal's Tale, where we talk about animal genitals. So that'll be fun. The evolution of polygyny, so one male to a bunch of females.
I imagine Kent Hovind is going to tune in for this because he's really happy talking about 15-foot wall penises. That's one of the things that he talks about most. So if you're going to cover animal genitalia, he'll probably be lurking in the side chat somewhere.
Hey, what's the most popular video on this channel?
That I don't know.
It's whale sex.
Obviously.
Oh, you're right, Nestling. That's true. Yeah, we didn't get to. Yeah. Oh well. I mean, it is what it is. But yeah, whale sex. So before that, the highest view count video on my channel was the R and Raw versus Mr. Intelligent Design discussion. That had the highest spot for a while. Whale sex eventually passed it up, which I think is thanks to Paulogia, because Paul mentioned it a couple of times in his different videos. So it eventually surpassed it. So yeah. But yeah, I'm excited. So we'll keep chugging along with.
We need to mention that. So when Paul and Shannon Q get drunk, they talk about whale sex, and then ask you to do a video about it.
Whale sex.
Yeah. So
yes,
people can make of that what they want. And I'm pretty sure Paul's going to appreciate this tiny mention, and get back at any of us at a later time.
Yeah, you feel like, you know what, Jackson, do a video on this.
Yeah.
Nestling's right. Mammal Evolution. Yeah, Mammal Evolution got a lot of views too. And for some reason, I have no idea why. I spoke so fast in that video. I don't know why I did it, but I spoke really fast. Just for that one. Like, the thumbnail design is a big factor when it comes to views. That's possible. Yeah, certainly. I don't do like custom thumbnail. Well, not anymore anyways. The person, there was a person who did them for me. Oh, we have a doggy drive by.
Yeah, we have someone who was really cute and now gets a treat. There you go. So this is the newest.
Yeah, our next book.
This is the newest addition to my set of co-hosts. His name is Harley.
No. Oh, how cute.
He's got a head that's bigger than mine. I'm just saying. But he's really cute.
Also, That is a very cute dog. Also, Nestle, we've already figured out what our next video that we're reviewing for this series is, and it's a climate change book. The Cambrian explosion videos. Yes, you're right. It is very strange. Yeah, so we'll review a climate change book next. We're gonna hate read a book by a guy who thinks climate change isn't real. So that'll be fun. All right. Well, thank you everybody for watching. Thank you, Peter, for hosting as always. I really appreciate it.
Anytime.
Thank you, Harley, for making an appearance.
Say hi to Jackson. Hi there. No, in the camera. Look in the camera. There's Jackson. Doesn't work.
Oh, Gregory Wrightstone. Here, I'll put it here in the side chat. Gregory Wrightstone. And then thank you everybody in the side chat who was here. We appreciated all of your comments. And we will see you all next time. So bye, everybody.
Bye, everyone.